we could talk about so many things, so that that I want to just kind of, I don't know, just go straight into something for
Let's
30
start with
minutes.
let's start with why you weren't at Austin Bitcoin Club.
Yeah, that's actually a good story. Uh, I was driving there, and then I looked at the map, and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna be like 20 minutes late. And there's traffic and shit, and I was just like, I kept going back and forth. I made one of those decisions to just like, I don't want to go there and not be in the right mood, and so I just
Right.
left. Event stuff for me is like very finicky. I have to be really ready and in the mood for it. It's just like not as much my forte. Jamie's the social person in the family. I'm the more kind of like, I can be social if I bring people to me in my thing, but when I like go outside of that, I'm more like fly on the wall type thing. But I'm getting better at it. I'm working on it. So,
Cool.
but
It's
I
no
hear it
worries,
was
man. I just
amazing.
that was me just fucking around. Anyways, it's a good time. We missed you, but we'll get you to one of them.
Yeah, I saw some pics of it, and what's his name, the Bull Bitcoin guy. You guys did a panel or something.
We always kind of just start the meetup off with literally like 15 to like at most 30 minutes of just me and a guest speaker and
Mm.
just kind of really low level philosophical kind of Bitcoin oriented, like the importance of community, like why Bitcoin's important. Like I would love to get like I tried to get your sister, honestly, before I got Francis, I was trying to get your sister to come up and do like why the relevance of women in Bitcoin and like how to get more women involved, just like really simple kind of little things like that. And then I just turn off the microphone and we just spend an hour and a half kicking it with Bitcoiners.
Did Jamie say she would do it or she wouldn't do it, or is she like trying to sidestep it? Because she needs to do it,
Yeah,
but I could,
it's a bit of all three of those. It's she
mm-hmm,
said she would do it, then she said she wouldn't do it, and then it was a bit of sidestepping. So it's
100%.
there was the ultimate kind of like it landed on. I have some things going on in Florida right now that like every once in a while just like require random trips down there that I need to go take care of some things. So I don't want to confirm and then not be able to make it. And I was like, that's fair. Because like if you're gonna say yes, I want you to be there. So if like you can't
Yeah,
give
yeah,
me 100%, then like don't give me yes at all. Just give me
yeah.
no.
Well,
It's
maybe
like
maybe if you sell to her as I'll go up together, brother sister duo, and then she won't feel as on the spot. I think I could get her to say yes to that or something. So give us a quick intro though, and I mean, like, we can talk about Bitcoin and maybe why it matters to you. You're like a quick take on that, but I want to talk about more just the world and like what's going on.
sure.
I want your perspective on like what do you think's going on now? Where do you see things going? And then I got a few kind of like rapid fire questions because I know those two questions will easily take us 30 minutes to get through. So who are you? Who
Yeah,
are
it's fair.
you? And how'd you get into Bitcoin? And like why Bitcoin?
Well, my name is Kyle. I am probably more commonly known online as the Bitcoin Bum. Uh, why I got into Bitcoin? I like the reason I got into Bitcoin is the same reason most people get into Bitcoin because like they're trying to figure something out financially that just like doesn't make sense in the world they're already living in, right? Like something about money just seems broken and like or even if it doesn't necessarily seem broken, like you're looking for a place to kind of make more money because the incentive model is there for that. Like the model inside of fiat is that like you got to go chase
Yep.
more money
Gains,
always,
right?
and you find yourself eventually in Bitcoin. I found myself in Bitcoin not chasing gains but chasing like uh money is clearly broken. I've learned enough over the years, like just with small piece by piece conversations around the world, like a conversation in Africa, a conversation in Romania, a conversation with a professor in San Francisco. Like each one of these little like random conversations that would be 2 or 3 hours deep would kind of deepen my understanding of what Bitcoin was. The crash of 2020 happened and it was like, all right, I really need to actually start figuring out what this thing is. 5 months later, I bought my first Bitcoin. 6 months after that, I was 100% of my net worth in Bitcoin. 4 or 5 months after that, I was in Austin trying to figure out how to like add value to the overall Bitcoin network. I got 100% in financially, and like I had two options at that point I was looking at, which was like leverage up and try and buy more Bitcoin that way, that was too risky. Wasn't really interested in like risking the Bitcoin I'd already worked
Mm-hmm.
to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like, where can I go add value to the network? Austin seemed like the place where a lot of stuff was happening. So I landed here, and thank God I did. But yeah, like to answer why, really, for me, like it, the why is really, it boils down to like it lined up so closely with principles. When I bought my first Bitcoin and dove all the way into the research, it became very clear very, very, very quickly that everything that Bitcoin was essentially, it was so much more than money. It was literally like it was a protocol level, like it was a protocol level set of principles. Like it
Mm.
was literally coding that solidifies a set of principles that like completely aligned with my lifestyle. Like search for truth and freedom, like low time preference, community, like all of these things that are just already 100% ingrained into my life. And once I bought into the money portion of Bitcoin, it became clear that Bitcoin was going to be a tool I could use to like further develop like a worldview that made sense to me through that principles first orientation.
So the principles, it aligned with some of the principles you already had. Did it bring you to any new principles? Or has there been any uncovering since then? Or is it more just going into the things that you've already intuitively felt and maybe you strengthen it or whatever, you know? Because for some, Bitcoin leads people to economics, libertarianism, all these other ideas, understanding of what money even is. And for me, it's probably more taking me into the government realm. And I think basically governments are not needed at this point. Like I'm completely going down that rabbit hole, but the economic side was fascinating. And my pursuit was I needed to fix money. I had money. I needed to protect it. So more, it was a preservation strategy for me rather than a gain strategy, which sounds like for you, but it was more of a principles alignment for you. And like, where does that leave you kind of today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say right off the top of my head, I don't know if there's anything necessarily that is unbelievably new or unfamiliar that I didn't already have before Bitcoin, which is, I don't know, I like semi unique. I'm sure I'm probably not the only one, but like I I I don't, right off the top of my head, I can't come up with anything that's like super crazy new. Like lowering
Mm-hmm.
time preference, maybe a bit. Like I definitely have seen my like pace of like the need to get things done out in the like I'm able to think
Yeah.
out further into the future than I used to be now that I have Bitcoin. Um, but it's not like nothing mind blowing. For sure, though, Bitcoin has, in all of the principles I already had, Bitcoin has strengthened my resolve to remain rooted in my principles. So, in the
Yeah.
sense that I haven't really found anything absolutely fresh from Bitcoin, I have absolutely strengthened the level of like the resolve to be oriented in a principles first lifestyle through Bitcoin.
Yeah. So how does that apply to today? You know, because like it's, it seems like Bitcoin and then you come to Bitcoin and then the world gets crazier and crazier. And then your decision to come to Bitcoin, like gets strengthened. And then we have to, I mean, for me, I have to be careful. I'm not falling into an echo chamber. That's kind of the biggest thing I'm trying to be aware of. Because every day it seems like it's more obvious, but like, where are my blind spots in that, right? How does the world today, you know, and maybe not even Bitcoin, maybe it applies or it doesn't, but where do you see us going? And what are the things that, like, obviously you wake up, you're trying to do things, you build things. What are you doing today? And how is what's going on today apply to that?
That's a huge question. So I guess let's unpack it with let's start with where we are today before we get too deep into like where it may be going
Right,
and like
exactly.
what I
Yep.
think the potential of the future is, right? So like today, as I already alluded to, I landed in Austin and decided to try and find a way to contribute value to the overall network. It was like, if I can't really get in any more financially, like what can I do to add value to the network? I can, like, I could have just like stayed in a 9 to 5 job. I'm not like the most like high skilled guy. I don't have any kind of like crazy credentials. I'm not like a computer coder. There's nothing I can do that I'm going to go make like a 6-figure, 7-figure salary. It's pretty much just like unskilled work. But I know I'm more intelligent than like unskilled labor, just like making $16, $17 an hour to like stack insignificant amounts of sats, really. I mean, nothing is insignificant, right? But
For
like,
sure.
I like have the bulk work of my wealth already in like a lifetime of savings and hard work saved in my Bitcoin now. I like the 9 to 5 grind wasn't the best use of my life's energy for Bitcoin
Right.
anymore. So I started working on trying to figure out how I could add value to the Bitcoin network. And what I already knew about myself is that like the one thing I enjoy doing that I also know I have a knack for is community building. I understand and thoroughly believe in the importance of community. I don't think there's anything more valuable for human beings. Like my personal belief is that
Yep.
like the only thing more valuable than Bitcoiners is or than Bitcoin is genuine connection with Bitcoiners. So
And humans, other humans,
how could
pre
I?
coiners.
Yeah. Humans in general, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
obviously there's
Mhm.
yeah. So I like listen. I love people, but
Same. Mhm.
I obviously am a Bitcoiner and I enjoy having Bitcoiners around. So the fact that most of the Bitcoiners rally around similar sets of principles,
Yep.
have generally a lot of the same worldviews and beliefs, it makes organizing a community around those worldviews and beliefs and kind
Hmm.
of principles a lot easier. Like I could try and just do a broad community creation, and when we get into like where things are going in the future, we'll touch on that. So we'll come back to a broader like outreach of community. But for me, when I landed here, it was like obvious that probably one of the first things I could try to do to grow value in the Bitcoin ecosystem was to try and create some type of community for Bitcoiners. And so I launched Austin Bitcoin Club, that meeting that you didn't show up to on Friday. And that was kind of the start of it.
Not gonna live
So,
that one down.
yeah.
So,
One or two more times, I'll.
so you and you're picking up traction. That's amazing. You know, Bitcoin's growing, but we need community leaders and builders, and you know that kind of also plays into a little bit of what's going on in the world and just how things are kind of decentralizing, which is actually becoming a buzzword at this point. But like, we live in this, a lot of Bitcoiners call it the fiat paradigm. But again, most of my listeners on this podcast, they're not into Bitcoin, but they hear me talking about it. Some are getting more into it. What do you, because you were in the military, right? Okay. So what do you see is wrong? Let's just maybe stick with the American culture and the American way of life. What do you see what's going on now that you kind of have a problem with? Because I think a lot of Bitcoiners, like we believe we're really fixing things. That's kind of, and we all kind of go about it in different ways, communities. Some are more like devs, build Bitcoin products that gets people access, right? What are the core things that really bother you the most about some of the craziness that's going on?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I want to backtrack just a bit because touching on it from the military perspective, right? Like starting from there, I a couple of years ago, I would not have been able to explain the answer I'm about to give you. But years ago, within like the first couple of days of my exit from the US Army, I just started feeling like something was wrong. And back then, I couldn't have possibly pegged it to any particular thing. I just knew. Every fiber of my being felt like something was completely broken. And I started telling my family, my friends, people that were around, I was like, guys, a revolution is imminent. Like it's coming. There's no way around it. Something has to change. But I had no idea what that meant or why I believed it. I just knew I believed it. And over the years, those conversations around the world that I told you, like a conversation with a professor in San Francisco, a hostel owner in South Africa, a business major on the front stairs of a hostel in Romania, like these conversations revolving around Bitcoin and many other topics, because again, they were all kind of intertwined with just the experiences we were all living, I started seeing beyond just the American, because if you had asked me before my travels abroad, I would have pegged the revolution as an American revolution. What I realized in my travels abroad is that the revolution was no longer, in my mind, actually just a US-based revolution. It was a global revolution. And that the thing that obviously as Bitcoiners we all know is kind of the problem is that the money itself is broken. So once you realize that the money is broken globally, you realize that there's a global monetary revolution happening. That's when you start getting involved in the Bitcoin. And once I got involved in Bitcoin, that was where it started to expand back into like a social cultural thing. It was like, okay, money's broken. And then you start realizing because money's broken, all of these other things are broken, whether it be food, whether it be the family unit, whether it be just just communities in general, medical. So many things, right? Literally everything, every single institution, they're all broken, and they're all broken because value itself is broken. Like the way that we perceive value, money, is fundamentally flawed. And therefore, every institution that we exist within, the community, the family, they're all driven by value. Now, again, there's some subtlety there. You start talking about the family value, right? Like, obviously, we don't value our wives and our children in like monetary terms, but we value life and its kind of ebb and flow very much so in dollar terms. So, and you have to kind of take it. Right. You have to take a deeper dive to really start getting through some of those subtleties. But once you do, it's very clear that the broken value system has started to infiltrate into the value of a family, the value of the food we eat, the value of the communities we gather in. Yeah, it's broken everything.
So this actually made me think of something, a connection that I haven't put together. So the Soviet Union, right? I was reading earlier how during the time they were like talking about how the central planning is amazing. The Russian economy is as great as America's, this and that. There was all this bullshit, all these economists that were like heralding this amazingness. And then one day it collapsed and they realized, oh, wow, it was basically a sham. And the fundamental problem with any kind of collectivist central planning is that there aren't price mechanisms in a free market. And no human, maybe eventually an AI could do it, but no human can plan for something that involves millions and millions of people and products and services and whatever. And when you made that point that money's broken, this is something I hear Safer Dean talk about a lot. Like, okay, he talks about fiat art and fiat this, and it really does affect everything. But I had trouble understanding why and verbalizing why. But it seems like the lack of a pricing mechanism, which is how we value things, it's how the market values things, and time and money, and these are very tied up, right? It seems like that is distorted because of the broken money and how they manipulate it. And it seems like that is then the rot that spreads to everything. Is that kind of the, like, if we had to boil it down in a nutshell, does that seem like what it is? It's like they're removing the pricing mechanism, they're removing free markets, and you just get distortions, basically.
Well, so yes, but you take that down all the way a layer lower, right? Because what are the markets? The markets are just me and you, dude. They're us. The market is a unit larger. It's where we take our individual values and we express those values with others. That's the market, right?
Human action, right?
Right. So if I am unable to take a monetary instrument, which is literally just supposed to be a representation of my value, my time, my energy, my resources, stored in a thing that should be not changed ever, that is clear and easy to understand amongst all parties equally. If I have one of those things and you have one of those things, we should understand what its value is so that when we exchange it, we can together decide what my time, energy, and resources are worth. And honestly, that will look different based on where you're at and who you're dealing with around the world. But it will be much, 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 much more clear if there's a monetary instrument that is not arbitrarily changed. Because the
Right.
challenge we run into right now is that we have a money where, like, I put in my time, my energy, my resources, and then someone else, somewhere else, just magically makes more of it. Now, how is that supposed to be something that I can understand? How can me and you and 10 other people get together and decide what our time, energy, resources are worth when it literally changes every minute because someone else is doing something way outside of my control?
Yeah, or it gets redistributed too to some thing or that or whatever, and that's another distortion that's detached from economic reality. Oh man, it's bad. I mean, that's why you get everything that's just so bad in the world. I mean, so but is the answer just? I mean, we say the answer is fix the money, so Bitcoin, right? But how would that work? I mean, would that just mean that like governments and markets can just be beholden to reality a little bit more? Like, you know, what is the actual way that we fix all the craziness? And is Bitcoin going to do that, in your opinion?
100%. I think Bitcoin, at a minimum, plays a very, very significant role
Mm-hmm.
in fixing that because it is the monetary instrument that isn't arbitrarily changed. So what we have is a monetary instrument that allows us to understand what our value is. Now, I would argue that beyond that, we still have a lot of work to do elsewhere. We actually have to then take that value model that allows us to understand our value, and then we have to go figure out what our value is, right? Like, so with my own personal example here in Austin, it's like, is my value the 9 to 5 job where I can earn a few bucks for whatever kind of just like non-skilled labor I'm doing so I can stack a little more Bitcoin and get, or is my time more valued at like taking the risk and trying to be entrepreneurial? Is my value best situated in arts? Is my value best situated in going to learn coding? Like, then you actually have to apply that value into the world. So like the money will allow us to understand our value, but we'll still have to do the soul searching to figure out like what it is that's valuable to us,
And to
what we
others.
find to
Yeah.
be our own value, and then we have to add that into society. So my guess is that when you start talking about governance models and like the kind of directions that things are trending as far as what the money does to correct some of the
Mm-hmm.
like the organized structures that we live in, is that each of us individually with a value that we can understand that isn't changed and can't be stolen will start to shift governance much, much, much smaller, much more hyper localized, and yeah, so like hyper localized governance, hyper decentralized governance. I think they talk about it in
Sovereign individual.
the sovereign individual. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
idea of the city state, right?
Yep.
I think government will become governance, and governance is really just going to be people that prove that one of the things that they do in their value add, like the thing that they're good at doing as an individual, is organization. It's literally just going to be like people who are
Right.
good at larger scale organization, because like there's a lot of big tasks that need to get done inside of a city state, right? Like it's a very big area. Sure, we could probably decentralize further and further and further, and I could just like walk down the road and be like, hey Tim, I know you fix holes in the road and we've got a hole over here. No, I don't think that will be as efficient in my mind as having some level of like larger scale, still hyper localized, but like a
Mm-hmm.
larger scale organizational unit. And the only way you'll stay in that position is through chosen taxation. You'll have to prove that
Yeah.
you're good at organizing, because I'm going to have to want to give you my money, because you like that's the only way you can get it. So As far as government is concerned, I think probably nation state governments will still be around. I think the only thing they'll do is defense. Like empirism is
Mm,
over. No more fucking navies floating around the world's seas. No more military bases
yeah.
in 37 countries. Just like you're there to make sure that we don't get fucking nuked or like flown over with aircraft or attacked by nuclear subs. But I think the overall hyper Bitcoinization, like in a world where we are smaller scale, hyper decentralized, hyper localized, and globally hyper connected,
Hmm.
I just think the model for like killing one another for resources is like a really unlikely scenario. I don't think we're trending towards any kind of like crazy wars. So the defense budget's not going to cost a lot. And the money that I want to give up for taxes is going to make a lot more sense to go out to my local governance than like a federal governance.
Yeah. So in Svetsky's recent article, I forgot the name of it, but he has this concept known as royalism that is basically that sovereign individual thesis where you have small city states or like local communities where there's basically like a CEO at the top and they run it like a business. And it's like you go live here, and if you like it, you pay it and you stay and you get the services you want. And if you don't, you go somewhere else. And it's like then the free market decides. And then companies, unlike governments, companies are then beholden to their customers / citizens. That's the problem with government today is like they're not beholden to anything. In fact, I was reading today, it's like every contract there is requires two parties to agree on some kind of services rendered or agreement. And when it comes to government, it's like you pay them taxes and they can kind of do anything they want. They're not actually beholden to any standards or agreements or anything whatsoever. Right. So like or in the military, you came out of it and then you became a Bitcoiner, which a lot of Bitcoiners are very kind of like libertarian, like change everything, let's shrink it. What are your thoughts now? Like, did you go in as being like a hardcore patriot and then you kind of change out after, or was it just like, what was your experience through that? I'm curious about that.
Yes. So first, before I touch on that, not Francis, but Svetsky's idea of royalism it's really fascinating because I've been talking about the same thing. I haven't labeled it royalism. I like
Yeah.
the concepts he's described, though, is very similar to what I've been calling like the ideas that really it's kind of like what we're moving towards at that city state level is something like neo-feudalism, right? And I know a lot of Bitcoiners are going to like probably like blood pressure rise as I say what I'm about to say, right? But there's even in a Bitcoin standard, in the early phases of the transition into the Bitcoin standard, I'd be willing to bet that some level of the model of like you will have nothing and you'll be happy is going to seep its way into hyper Bitcoinization.
Well, do you mean inequality? Like, what do you mean by that? Do you just think there's going to be like a lot of inequality?
I think there are going to be the extreme laggards that just like never got it, but then hyper Bitcoinization is kind of just here, right? It's like it's what we're doing now. They have nothing, but in that model that we just outlined, where people have this wealth that's never been experienced before, right? Where it's like we're running city states like a business with the people who have the absolute most at the top and the people who have nothing at the bottom. But like we will have enough where those people with nothing can still come into the system. The difference is it won't be a system where it stays that way forever. The idea is not that you will just be subsidized through the rest of your life. It will be like you get brought in because this is the standard now. And now you will start earning and saving and contributing into the Bitcoin system, right? Like everybody has value. We have to figure out what that value is. But again, it's just like a subtle little thing where it's like it's more joke than anything else. But to some extent, for like a small window of time, there's going to be some people, even in a Bitcoin standard, where they'll have nothing, but they'll be completely content.
Well, isn't the difference though, the inequality in a world like today, where the more money and power you have, and the more you can kind of operate with corrupt governments and like have a monopoly on violence, and like the inequality today is not, I don't think would be the same inequality you'd have in a Bitcoin standard, because you just couldn't get away with as much craziness. There'd be like a free market check.
Well, here's the difference, right? I think the level of inequality will, in my guess, just guess, But my guess is the level of inequality, the difference from the people who have the least and the people who have the most, might widen even further for some period of time to some extent.
Yeah.
The difference still boils down to the fairness of the system.
Right.
Listen, there's going to be super rich and there's going to be super poor because some people just got it and made the right choices early in the Bitcoin era. But in the Bitcoin standard, the people who fuck up, even if they have lots of Bitcoin, if they fuck up, if they make choices that don't add value or actually detract value, and they lose their Bitcoin, they can't go to their friends who can magically keep them rich. You, just like anybody else, if you lose your Bitcoin, if you lose the value of your Bitcoin, you'll just have to fucking contribute value to society like everybody else. Like you will have to earn more Bitcoin. You will not be able to magically acquire more. That's the difference. It's like I see a huge gap between the poorest and the richest that will still be there, but it will be a fair system. The people who actually produce value will earn value, and that's a fair system.
Right. Well, and because Bitcoin and a Bitcoin standard demonetizes violence, you can have all the money in the world, but like, again, you're not getting somebody's Bitcoin. And in the system today is like you have all the money in the world and then you create narratives and products and services that the government enforces through mandates and whatever. And you basically have a monopoly on a source of extracting value from humanity by turning people into sheep, into cattle and whatever. And it's like, that won't exist. So it will level the effective playing field, but some people will have more resources than others, but that's like in a way kind of nature. It's like survival of the fittest in a way, I feel like, right? So I don't know. I guess
the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule is literally seen like everywhere in nature. So
always, and always will. Right. So there was a second part to that question, the military question. And maybe that's, so what I want to do is like, we should have another show and we should like pick like one topic when we do it. Cause I think we can talk about like so many different things, like specifically. Right.
Sure.
So we'll keep the show to like 45-ish minutes and give an audience an intro to you. So the military pre and post, did your perspective change at all? Like, Run us through that.
It's a really kind of a big question as well. So like the one thing I will say that I feel like a lot of people who've never been in the military don't understand. It's like it's one of the largest misconceptions I think that civilians have about the military is that like there's a lot of people in the military who join for patriotism and like duty to country.
You think a lot don't then, or a lot don't?
The overwhelming majority are not there for patriotism and like honor and country. It's
Is it just opportunity? Is it just like
100%. It's opportunity. It is, and it's an overwhelming majority of people who come from a youth that provides very little opportunity. It is like it's like a lot of people who are coming from really terrible situations. Like they're either in drugs or gangs or they're looking at jail or prison time. Like they don't see school as an option. They don't see anything financially in front of them. They come from broken families. Like it's a lot of people who come from like lower middle class to lower income, uneducated, just nothings. Right. And here's an opportunity, myself included. So like when I joined, I had a pretty hardy criminal record. I was getting in trouble all of the time for drugs. I was hanging out with the wrong crowds downtown. I was either trending towards jail or probably like drugs and death. Like jail and drugs, based on like where I grew up, those were like the two economic realities of like where my life would have trended had I just stayed on the path that I was on before I joined the military. Now, once I got into the military, a lot of that changed. What happens once you get in is that you start getting trained, right? You start getting indoctrinated into like the things you need to know to survive. The things you need to know to survive are that when you go to war, everybody else, if they're not wearing the uniform you're wearing, they're the bad guy. And these are the good guys, right? So you get to war, and what you have is, I fight for, not for country, not duty or honor. I fight for the guy and the girl next to me who are on survival. My team.
Yeah.
And my paycheck. I'm also like, none of us are going out if you don't pay us. I'm not going out on the mountain if you don't pay me. And I'm not doing it for country. I'm doing it for him and him. So my paycheck and my family. And the paycheck is, as long as it's there, you can expect that we're probably just going to follow the orders. And it becomes very easy, especially in war, because that idea that you get ingrained into you, that is like everybody's the bad guy, becomes very, very easy to fully adopt once somebody over on my side dies. As soon as one person is killed, right? A friend of mine is dead now.
Yeah.
It's very, very real. And it becomes very easy to take the thing that used to just be a thought process and crystallize it into concrete fact that women, children, babies, they're all fucking terrorists. What level of training are they at? They're all the bad guy. So not super patriotic, but definitely very willing to do what I need to do to keep me and my friends alive, and not doing any of that if you don't pay me. So it's really about opportunity, and it's about keeping the people that you care about that are there with you alive.
Would a lot of military service echo that sentiment and that thought process, or do you see any that are kind of diluted and convince themselves of, the flashy stuff you see in movies, or is it closer to your perspective?
It's a really tough question to answer, because just like any group of people, like an overall blanket statement isn't going to work.
Right.
My guess is that I'm certainly not alone. I know
you see it enough, right? You see or hear it enough to where you're not just like a major outlier. Because I've never heard that before ever from anybody, right? And it's a pretty eye-opening perspective, actually.
Yes, I would say I am not an outlier. I might not be the majority.
Right.
And honestly, even if I'm not the majority, I would say that maybe I am even the majority, but I'm not maybe the majority in the sense that people have yet actually understood it themselves. I think they know it, but I think like me, before I found yoga, like I obviously knew something was wrong, but didn't know something was wrong. So when I was a 245-pound roid raging alcoholic that literally was just like destroying my life, that was me for 5 years after Afghanistan. And if you had asked me back then, and people told me all the time, my family was telling me like I need to like calm down, like I need to not be drinking as much, like. But another thing they really ingrain into you in the army or just the military in general is that like there's nothing wrong with you, right? Like ever. You're going for a run and like you trip and break a leg and your bone is sticking out of your leg. Like we still have 7 miles to go, dude. Better drag that bloody stump behind you. Like, and you have to actually believe it, because you go to war and like you're outside and like the guy next to you gets shot in the head. You don't have time to fucking cry about it.
Yeah.
You don't have time to like process it. You have to point your gun at the direction of like where the bullet came from and handle your fucking business. So it's really, 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 really difficult to like reach a point where you can be honest with your feelings, because you're so trained to never have anything wrong with you. How do you get to somebody who like genuinely believes nothing wrong with me? I'm 100% fine.
Wow. So was it yoga for you?
Yoga was a
big part of it.
Yoga saved my life for sure.
And did that get you into just mindfulness and meditation, or just like self-awareness? Like, was it kind of a catalyst for some other things?
Yeah, it led me down just what I would call a spiritual path.
Awesome. Well, dude. Okay. So yeah, we could keep going, but let's do round 2 instead. Where can people follow along with you?
Most active on Twitter, _Bitcoin_bum, the Bitcoin bum.
The _Bitcoin bum.
Yep. So there's that. If you want to come and hang out with me and other Bitcoiners, the easiest place to do that is our once monthly meetups. You can find more information for that at austinbitcoinclub.com. You can also download the Meetup app and just follow Austin Bitcoin Club there. And then finally, like outside of our free once monthly social event, we're also looking to start doing many more like external Bitcoin things. So keepaustinpleb.com is where we will be hosting all of our kind of like social cultural paid events. Like for example, the gun range day that we'll be hosting this Saturday. So
awesome. And we'll have links to everything in the show notes. Kyle, we'll do a round 2. Thanks for coming on.
Colin, man, appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Stop recording.